Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers, and this morning, on this sunny day, I'm looking at a very interesting book, now in a second edition, from Jordan's. It's called Elderly People and the Law, and it's been written by a retired judge, Gordon Ashton, OBE, and Caroline Bielanska, rather. The book itself is an important book, as I say, new in a second edition. You can see the front cover, and Mr. Ashton is a retired DJ with a great deal of experience. The book itself is nearly 700 pages long. It's got a detailed index, very much the standard type of work from Jordan's, and one I think which is very important. One thing I did find helpful were a number of lists of contacts and various other links to things like the web, for instance government websites, directories. So really there's a lot of information here when you're dealing with elderly people, and elderly clients in particular. They have money, there are much larger number of them than ever before, and so this book is very timely and very important. The chapter headings are like this. It deals with financial affairs. There's no index as such, but you do have paragraph numbering, and there is of course useful footnoting there, so you can see exactly what you're looking for in some detail, and it tries to give a very detailed account of where we are today. In other words, it starts off distinguishing older people and trying to set the record straight a little bit. It starts off with a quote from Victor Hugo: 40 is the old age of youth, 50 the youth of old age. You see, we're starting to look in rather different terms now at what age means. The contents section is set out there quite nicely, as you can see. Then Mr. Ashton has produced a preface to the first edition, and then there's a preface to the new one, which was written in November of 2013. Anyway, that's the book itself. We've given it a review title, which is on the web and in the journals. It says, "For lawyers and lay people, a detailed and authoritative overview of legal issues affecting the elderly." And what we say is this: with the increasingly ageing population in this country, works of reference concerning legal issues pertaining to elderly people are now becoming almost commonplace, and this is one of a number of books which are currently available. An especially outstanding example, therefore, is this second edition from Jordan's. And Mr. Ashton, who is a retired district judge and nominated judge of the Court of Protection, has a considerable amount of experience, practical experience of this area, so I think it's well worth bearing in mind the expertise we have here. And he reminds us that it was almost 20 years ago that he wrote the first edition of what has now become a well-established authoritative practitioner's guide to such a diverse and difficult subject. And as I've indicated, it's one where we have to think much more clearly because of the increase in the number of older clients and older people we have to deal with. He goes on to say, quote, "It was so much simpler then," he remembers, adding that community care was then in its infancy, and the courts had less involvement in health care, and mental incapacity was only addressed in respect of financial affairs. Of course, since that time, he then points out, the social and legal climate has changed almost unrecognisably in the intervening years, and the fields of law that need to be covered have expanded exponentially. And of course that's the reason for the new edition, and as I say, as we move towards the middle of the 21st century, we are going to have a much larger group of older people. Also, unlike 2 decades ago, we now have the internet, through which a veritable deluge of information can be assessed. Even law reports, which are often freely available now. And the challenge, therefore, for the busy practitioner is to try and select things. And although it remains in collecting often disparate information from here and there and bringing it together to select and organise the material needed specifically to assist a client, I think this book actually assists in probably one of the best ways you can. And this is really, of course, rather a problem for those advising or representing elderly clients on one of several issues, or a range of them. That's why the book itself has effectively expanded its overall terms of reference. And so together, Ashton, together with his co-author, Caroline Bielanska, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, who's a recently retired Chief Executive of Solicitors for the Elderly, Ashton has set out with ample success, in our view, with Caroline, a view to create an overview, quote, in a world of legal specialisms, because we're getting a bit specialised here, which brings all the relevant material pertaining to a whole range of legal issues that directly affect older people. The book covers in detail, if not all, the areas of law that impact on the elderly. And after introducing the general legal background, it examines such matters as mental capacity and the Court of Protection's role, as well as the exercise of rights and the performance of duties by older people. And practical matters here also covered in some detail include the family and the role of carers, housing, community and health care and so forth, financial affairs, testamentary provision, and matters arising on death. One area, challenging the authorities, is the similarly challenging title in chapter 9 of the book, which deals with the pesky issues such as medical reports, data protection, complaints procedures, and the Ombudsman's role. You never know, do you, when information like this may come in handy. Furthermore, if you're doing further research, there are numerous references in the footnotes throughout, as well as extensive tables of cases, statutes and statutory instruments. And there's a 55-page index at the back, so you've got a very well thought out structure for this book. So let me conclude by saying, if you are a practitioner, or indeed anyone advising the elderly on a range of legal matters, you'll do well to acquire this reliable, authoritative and up-to-date volume as what is actually the mainstay of your professional library in this area. As I've indicated, it's available on an e-book and the publication date is 2014. It's a heavy book, as I say, 650 pages, but I'm actually quite grateful for the very detailed index, because quite often that's where, when you're navigating, you're looking for something very specific quite often. As I say, you've got, for instance, this is healthcare. You can see how much information there is when it comes to the footnoting as well. But I'd like to thank Gordon Ashton and Caroline Bielanska very much indeed. This is a very important contribution to this practice area, and it's an area I think which all of us are going to find will be expanding as the century develops. So thank you to Jordans and thank you to the authors for a very carefully considered statement on elderly people and the law. Thank you. Bye-bye.